Hello. So in this video, I just want to give an overview of the Business Management Benchmarks project. This is a project that started about a year ago when Professor Shelley Cohen in the FBM department asked me if there was a way to automate downloading the financial information from companies' 10K reports. So up until recently, what she'd been doing every year is going to the various companies' websites and downloading a PDF of the 10K for the companies, and then opening up those PDFs and extracting out various financial quantities that she was interested in keeping track of. And she would open up the PDFs for the different companies and find the values and then just enter them into a spreadsheet. And then after she had done that over quite a few weeks, she would take the spreadsheet and give it to various instructors so that they could use it in their classes where they were talking about financial data for different companies. And so I told her there was a way to probably to automate it, but I wasn't really sure exactly how that would work out. But it turned out that it works really in a spectacular way, and we can sort of automate a lot of different parts of collecting this data. So at any rate, what you're looking at right now is a website on GitHub. This site up here is called GitHub, and this is a place where you store, where programmers can store software projects. In particular, our project documents and data and source code are all stored here. The grant that we've been working on is a grant for open source content and open educational resources material as well too. So this project is all open source and available to anyone who wants to reuse it or take a look at it. And this is the website where the software for the project is hosted. It's just called Business Management Benchmarks is the name of the project, and everybody just calls it a repo. This is an example of a GitHub repo. And in here are various documents, including the HTML pages that I'm going to show you in a little bit, that contain the web apps that we built to go with this project. And then there's a bunch of other kind of documentation here as well too, related to the databases underneath, and then some other stuff as well. Okay, so here's a description down here. Here's the README for the project, and I'll put the link to the project in the description for the video. But just to summarize what it says down here is it explains that we're collecting this retail data for a number of companies. And also for each company, we also put them into a segment as well too. So a segment is kind of like the industry that they are, the type of company they are. So for example, we might have, department stores is the segment, and then Macy's, Nordstrom, Dillard's, and Kohl's are all examples of department stores. Or the segment might be like discount stores, and then Walmart, Target, Dollar General, and so on are examples of discount stores. So every company that we use, we also give it a segment as well too, and occasionally we also give it a sub-segment as well. So we have one segment called specialty, and in specialty we have a bunch of sub-segments is what we call them as well. So specialty is a segment, and then beauty is a sub-segment within the specialty segment. And so here are the companies that are part of the beauty sub-segment. So at any rate, most of these are American companies, but they're U.S. companies, and so we get the data, financial data for them from their 10K filings. But then there are also some non-American companies as well too. Here's a list of the non-American companies. And so for these companies, we have to collect the data in a slightly different way. And the way we collect the data for the non-American companies is we get it from Yahoo Finance. So here's a list of all of the different companies that we used. We also save the ticker symbol for them, and also something called the CIK. So each company that files 10K reports with the SEC, and the SEC is the governmental agency that handles tax issues. So every company files their 10K annual reports with the SEC. And the SEC uses a number called a CIK, which I forget what it stands for, but it's basically a unique identifier for the company. So if you have an American company and its CIK is this number right here, then that's going to represent Walmart. And so the CIKs are all different for different companies, and American companies all have these CIKs, and then the non-American companies don't have those. But we also kind of have kept track of the ticker symbol as well too, and sometimes you can use the ticker symbol to look up company information as well. So here's the ticker symbols for all the American companies, and of course for the non-American companies there are the ticker symbols, and so it's mostly just the ticker symbol for the non-American that allows us to look up the non-American data. But so in this table we also keep track of the segment. These companies up at the top are all part of the discount segment, and then on down the line here, here's the specialty segment here. And like we said, for the specialty segment, we go ahead and divide it up into subsegments as well too. Here's the subsegments over here for these companies that are in the specialty segment. So we have segments and we have subsegments. Not every company has a subsegment. Only the ones that are in the specialty segment have subsegment as part of their designation. And then the non-American companies could either be in just a segment, or they could be in a segment and a subsegment as well. So here's an example of the kinds of data we wanted to collect for each company. We wanted to collect these values right here. The problem is, of course, for each company calls these terms by different names. It turns out that when you file your 10K reports with the SEC, there is a stipulation that you have to file those annual reports, and you have to report, all your financial numbers in that report. But there's no stipulation on having to use a particular taxonomy or a particular naming scheme for the financial numbers that you're reporting. So not everybody calls net revenue net revenue. It can be net sales. It can be all kinds of different names. And usually the companies are consistent from year to year, the way they name the different values, but they're across the different companies, there's not as much consistency. And so sometimes companies use kind of a standard taxonomy to report with. They choose a particular wording or name for a concept that's used by others, but sometimes it's something that's totally unique to the company as well too. So these are the numbers that we wanted to collect, or the financial concepts that we wanted to collect. And the problem we're sort of facing is every company files with the SEC with these things under different names. So you can download the SEC filings for each company for each year, and that's pretty simple to do. But the problem is what you get is you get their naming scheme and the numbers that go with those, with their naming scheme. Once you collect this data up here, these sort of basic financials, you can do a bunch of calculations for metrics and calculated values that you might want to have to look at as well too, like gross margin, liabilities. There's a bunch of percentages that you might compute, cost of goods percentage, and basically these are things like you take the cost of goods and divide by the net revenue, say. And then there's some ratios down here as well too: inventory turn, asset turn, and then the current ratio, the quick ratio, debt to equity ratio, and the 3-year CAGR, we call it. So these are all calculations that you can do once you have this original data up here. So the goal is to, at least for the different companies, is to download and standardize the fields for the data so that it's all stored under these same names. And then once you have a standardized list of all of your financials for all of these companies, you can then think about comparing company to company. And so that's what we did. And we created a few web pages that accomplish that. The first one is down here. It's called Companies Side-by-Side Analysis. So I'm just going to click on this one, and we'll come back to our page in just a minute. But when you click on that, it takes you over to this page here. And this page, we call this one the Company to Company web page. And what it is it's a way to take those companies that we're looking at and compare them side by side, so in 2 columns. So in this first column, I have a choice for the first company. So maybe let's just go and choose maybe Dillard's, and then I get the financials for Dillard's up here, and these are always in thousands of units, whatever the units are. In this case, they happen to be dollars, but in that original company, that's a British company, so those were not in dollars there, but they were still in units of 1,000, right? So let's go back to Dillard's. So this is the data for the year 2023 for Dillard's, and maybe I want to compare that to Macy's over here from 2023. So up here I'm seeing the side by side of the financials, but then also to kind of what's more pertinent for comparing the 2 companies might be these ratios down here. So you might not care so much about the total volume of the different financial numbers up here, although you might care about that and talk about that. But in terms of which company is sort of performing better given where they're at, maybe these ratios are better for you. So okay, so this is here's these financial ratios that we're talking about and calculations, and so these guys down here allow you to do comparative analysis in several ways of the 2 kinds of companies that you're looking at. And you could look at Dillard's and Macy's from 2013, but you could also dial over here to Macy's for the year before, like 2022 or whatever, and then you can kind of compare between those. Oh no, that should have been Macy's. Sorry. Okay, and so you can kind of compare from year to year. So you can think about a number of different things that you might want to look at in a web app kind of like this, but this is the specific one that we've chosen to use for the courses that use this financial data, and also the way it's used for different instructors. All right, so down here, let's go back to Dillard's, take a look at Dillard's. 2023, right? So if you're looking at Macy's versus Dillard's, if you come down here, there's also a link that you can click off to that will show you the actual SEC report for this year as well. So let's just use Macy's as an example. If I come down here and I click on this SEC report, this is actually precisely what is reported to the SEC for this year. So this display right here is what you can find on the SEC's website if you go and look at the financial statements for Macy's. Now this one, if you're looking at the 2 statements here, there's the income statement over here, and remember the income statement involves a number of months, so a time period. So this is 12 months ending on February 3rd, 2024. So that's why we call this 2023 data, because it's mostly in the time frame for 2023, but it goes up to February 3rd, 2024. And then here's the values down here, and these are the ones on the income statement. Now, these are in millions, and remember, our displays were in thousands, so let's just take a look here. Here's net sales is 23,092, and that would be in millions. So if we go back and look over here, yeah, here it is listed in thousands over there. Okay, so you got to be a little bit careful whether things are listed in thousands or millions when you're looking at different things. But if we go back over here, and the data that we pulled for that year was just from this column right here. If you look at the balance sheet, usually you have a couple columns for the balance sheet as well too, and this date should be the same as the date of ending for the period on the income statement. But these are the balance sheet values over here. And so you can check, for example, here, let's just look at inventories. And this is in millions of dollars here, but there's the inventories is 4,361. Let's go back over here and look at the inventory. Oh, do we have inventory? Yeah, so up here. Yeah, there it is right there, right? Okay, so you can kind of see what the relationship is between the data that we pulled and also the SEC. And if you notice, for Macy's, the SEC looks like this, or the SEC data looks like this. And then for Dillard's, if you look at Dillard's, it's also a little bit different. Here's Dillard's over here. Here's the income statement for it. And you can see already from these two that sometimes the wording is different for these guys down here. So the different charts are kind of organized in a different way for each company. So they often will not be completely equivalent in terms of looking at them. They actually look different. This one's quite a bit longer for the balance sheet, and then if we go look at Macy's balance sheet, it's a little bit shorter. So the SEC versions are just displayed the way the companies report it, and with the labels over here that the companies choose to use for this stuff. Our display, of course, is different. We've standardized these terms over here so that we can kind of compare them from company to company. So that's the first page here. Let me see if I can zoom this down a little bit. Okay, so you can also click over here on this menu and go to company versus segment. Once you're on the company versus segment page, what it's going to do is allow you to compare all of the different companies that are in a segment to the segment averages over here. So if you want to know how department stores did kind of overall, you can look at this column. This is an aggregate over all of the different values that come from the companies that are in that segment. And so you can switch between the companies over here and compare each company to its segment average. And this is kind of nice if you want to know how a company's faring compared to kind of industry norms or whatever. And again, you can select the year up here, and once you select the year, it gives you the data for just that year. And then finally, there's a third page over here just called reports. And when you're on this page, what you can do is you can actually look at a version of the spreadsheets with all the calculations on them, and you can see the individual numbers. Here, for example, there's several different kinds of reports. There's one called benchmarks, and if you look at the benchmark reports, they're just all the companies for that particular year, and then the values like net revenue and the financial numbers we're looking at kind of all calculated as well too. So there's the benchmarks. Then there's segments and benchmarks. This one's kind of nice because it gives you the segment, and then right underneath it, it gives you the different companies that are in that segment. So the line up here would be the segment averages, and then the lines down here would be the company calculations for those things. And there's a couple other ones. If you just want to look just at the segments and kind of compare the segments between each of the between them, you can do that. And if you want to look at the sub-segments on their own as well too, you can do that. Once you're looking at one of these reports and you've chosen a year, you can actually export it out to a CSV file or to an Excel file, and then you can kind of open it up in Excel and work with it. And it's the same over here. So for example, if you're looking at the company versus company, you can export that to Excel, and then when you open it up, you have just these numbers side by side and an Excel file that you can work further with. So that's kind of nice if you want to kind of do any sort of analysis on your own. Okay, so that's the basic kind of tour of the web apps that we built. So we basically put the data that we downloaded for those 48 companies into a database, and in the next video I'll talk a little bit about what that database looks like, and also how you might use that database to do different visualizations than the ones we're looking at here. So this is a very straightforward visualization of the data that we collected, but of course there's many other ways you can think about displaying this data, and that's actually the subject of the grant that we got for next year.